All righty, guys. Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Monique, and I'm going to say Boulet?
Boulet like Chevrolet. That's what my father-in-law used to say.
All right. So Monique Boulet.
There you go.
We're going to be talking with her. She is a candidate for Lafayette Mayor President, and it's going to be an interesting conversation. So we have plenty of questions to ask, and we've also have some questions from Reddit. Some Reddit users have provided some questions, so enjoy the show. Alrighty, and before we get started, I just want to go ahead and mention our presenting sponsor is Chase Group Construction. Chase Group is a great local company, great local guys. They take the lead and become your one point of contact for the entire design build process. Or if you're looking to build a new structure for your business or renovate a business, they can help you out there. They have a diverse portfolio of projects that range from medical to popular restaurants to multi-unit shopping centers. They've built several locations around the Lafayette Parish and also St. Landry and throughout other parishes. You can check them out at chasegroupconstruction.com, and their logo and website is on the screen. Alrighty. So, Monique, it is good to have you.
Very nice to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Are you, well, thank you. Yeah, again. Are you familiar with developing Lafayette at all?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts, but every once in a while I'll catch an interesting topic and tune in.
So I guess I'm talking about like the podcast for sure, but like the page where I post construction projects and all that too.
I do get the email.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'm one of your members there.
Nice.
So
nice.
I do quickly. I appreciate the information.
All
it's
good.
good
I just wanted to make sure
on.
I can establish that we're familiar.
Yeah.
The only thing I know about you beyond seeing your posters and knowing that your mother is the former Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco, I don't know a whole lot about you. So this is going to be a good way for me to learn more about you and kind of see where things lie and the future of Lafayette if you are elected.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and let you have a moment to just kind of introduce yourself, kind of give the high-level point of who you are to people that are listening.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I am Monique Blanco Boulet, born and raised in Lafayette. Not an attorney in this race. I have an MBA. I'm the only one with a real business background. Born and raised here in Lafayette. Married my husband David out of USL, at the time USL. He was in oil and gas, and so we got married and followed his career for about 10 years to Houston.
Okay.
And I did our time in Houston. Everybody in oil and gas has to do a little time in Houston.
It's like boot camp.
It is. It is. I remember telling them, look, because in the oil field, they would send you somewhere for 2 years, and it was, you talk to people 30 years later. I was like, I'm not here for 30 years. We will go back home. And so we knew that at the time, but we spent some time in Houston. He was involved in the development of deep water off the continental shelf, and all of that development and technology was developed in the New Orleans area, which he's from there. So we got to live 5 years in New Orleans, which his mother was sick towards the end of her life. So it was a blessing, I think, to be able to be in New Orleans. And then back to Houston and Dallas. And then in 2001, it was not coincidentally, actually intentional. After 2001, David was selling energy investments on Wall Street and had a meeting on September 12th at 8:30 in World Trade 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he was working in Dallas in the financial center, and we didn't know if those planes were finished in New York or going to hit other financial centers. It shook me up a little bit. A lot. I remember calling him and asking him to pick up Kathleen, our oldest child. She was at Mother's Day out, bring her home. And we decided shortly after that to come back to Louisiana. we wanted to be with family. And we did. That was in September. Within maybe 6 or 8 weeks, we had moved home. And we had 2 kids at the time. We have 4 kids now. So, you know, when I talk about that, I know the lure of Texas, right?
Yeah.
When we left, he was working for Frost Bank, and the president of the bank called me and said, "Do you know what you're doing?" Oh, you know, good Louisiana girl. Yes, we're going home for family. I know what I'm doing. He said, "This is the difference between European vacations for your family and Florida beaches." I was like, "It's okay." I mean, you know, didn't define our level of success by our vacation status.
Yeah, right.
We didn't really actually go to the beaches. The kids like camping, so we found the state parks in North
So
Louisiana.
they were saying that you were going to lose money moving out of Houston. Okay, got it.
Yeah, which we did.
Okay.
He got job offers for years to go back. So, I mean, there's a lure in Texas. There is. There are huge opportunities. What I want in Lafayette is not for my kids to have to make a sacrifice to come home. Today, Kathleen works in Houston for Schlumberger, ironically. Still oil and gas. That one kind of put a
Runs in the family, right?
hit in my stomach because it's cyclical.
Yeah.
She was in Little Rock for a little while with Schlumberger, and they shut a plant down there after 1 year, you know, in her job, and they moved her to Houston. But it was pretty traumatic for her. You know, that was the tough part about oil and gas, was the cyclicalness of it. And so anyway, our youngest is at West Point. He's a freshman, or a plebe, I guess they call it. We dropped him off this summer. I want them back in Lafayette, not just to want to raise their kids the way we did. I want them to come back to Lafayette to raise their families and to have really interesting, dynamic careers. I don't want them to sacrifice to come home. I want them to be here in all of their splendor and glory, professionally and personally. And I think we can get there. I think we have the bones to really bring in dynamic jobs with good pay and good benefits. You know, this week is the groundbreaking for First Solar down in New Iberia, and I was very involved in that. But it's advanced manufacturing. It's high-end jobs. It's 700 direct jobs. It's big. Lafayette is dynamic enough to pick and choose what we want here. The assets we have, fiber is huge. So anyway, that's kind of like my underlying goal. So David and I, let me go back to, got married, right? 30 years we've been married.
Yeah, this year, right?
This
Congratulations.
year. Yes. Yeah, 30 years of marriage means you can get through some things, right? We've been through a lot in life together, and I'm grateful for David. You just met him.
Yep.
He's helping tremendously on the campaign trail. So anyway, just a little shout out to David. But I went to USL undergrad, went back to UL. Actually, before I had kids, I went to UNO when we were in New Orleans and started my MBA. And really took an interest in finance kind of as a specialty, and then got pregnant and had a complicated pregnancy. And so with our relocations, didn't finish my MBA at the time, waited until the kids were much older. Then we built a family, and back in 2013, I went back to school and got an MBA, an executive MBA at UL. So you almost had to start over. You did have to start over. There were no carryovers from UNO.
Right.
But I've always had that interest in business. To me, it's odd. It's when you get into the financial markets, it's a little bit like politics from a weird perspective. But I guess, I was born into it and kind of see that. But so that's kind of my background. For the last 9 years, I've been running the Acadiana Planning Commission. We built it out of scratch in 2014. There was an agency here that had run into financial trouble, into bankruptcy.
Okay.
And the Department of Commerce, there was some things that weren't done correctly, right? In government, typically you don't get away with mismanagement of funds. But they had de-designated Acadiana, which it was one of the first times they've ever done that. So meaning if there were like a natural disaster, Acadiana would not be eligible for funds from the Department of Commerce. We were, for a short time, was a donut hole in the state of Louisiana of eligibility for those kinds of funds. And so they reached out to a neighboring district in Houma and set up a grant there. And a friend of mine runs it. He called me, was just finishing my MBA, and he said, "Can you help me with this? You know, we have these programs," and I didn't know exactly what it was, but you know, at that time I had been helping David. We had a startup oil and gas company, and I said, "You know, I can do anything for 6 months. Let me just go try this." And before I knew it, we were meeting with the parishes across the region, trying to understand their needs. A lot of the parishes have limited resources, limited staffing, and they're fighting the same battles, you know, in silos over and over and over again. And so what our job was to figure out what could we elevate and deal with at a higher level, a regional level, with economies of scale, with more singular purpose and higher level of impacts. And it was fascinating. You know, the first thing that came out of that was transportation planning. And so the city of Lafayette housed the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is federal highways sends dollars down to urbanized areas. But that urbanized area touched 6 parishes and I think 7 cities. So like all of the cities within Lafayette Parish were included in that. And only 5 jurisdictions were participating out of 13. And it was not working well. So we met with Joey Durrell at the time and said, you know, how about if we move the MPO into the regional seat? And he thought we were crazy. And he kind of smiled at us and patted us on the back and sent us on our way. And I mean, before we left, I said, you know, just think about it. Just let us go out. Let's go through the motions for the next few months. And if it looks right to you, call. And Christmas that year, I remember getting a call between Christmas and New Year's from Kevin Blanchard. Kevin was working with Joey. And he said, "Can you be in Joey's office on Monday?" And I was like, "Yep, I can do that." We showed up, and he said, "I thought y'all were crazy, but it makes sense, and it could work." And so then he said, and this is kind of funny, at the time he was struggling with the council. They were voting against anything he supported. He said, "Just don't tell anybody I'm with you." And I was like, as long as you sign at the end of the process, let us work it. We ended up getting a unanimous vote from the council, which I still to this day, we didn't go in knowing that council at the time was not very transparent. They held their cards tight. But by the time we finished, I think we had built enough credibility, and we moved the MPO over. So we had filed with the Secretary of State in February. No staffing, no employees. By June, we had 14 employees and about $1 million of administrative grants, but limited because it was just transportation. So the next step was to build out capacity, the skill sets. We had some engineers, we had some planners, we had really good skill sets, and it was to take that out and develop it across the region. And eventually we got a GIS grant. We have tremendous GIS capacity today. We spread out into broadband, and after the floods of 2016 became integral in the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, in the state response and in the local response and in the recovery. We actually were the pilot program for FEMA, setting up watershed databases. And today we have recently set up a watershed district, working in conjunction actually with Congressman Higgins, so that we can do some real systematic analysis. The state is working on a model for us. And so the agency grew. Today we've gotten over 250, well over 250. I think 250 is an easy, safe number. $250 million of investment in Acadiana.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. We are in watershed, broadband, transportation, economic development, and lots of major projects. And so that is one of the things I think I'm most proud of. And one of the things, and I don't know if that's another question, I'm probably blurring all of this into some of your questions.
There's some that are blurring, but I mean, I think for the first 15 minutes here, I think that was good. I want to... So we're at about 15 minutes. I want to go ahead and read off my other 2 sponsors, and then I want to go into segmenting portions. And we already have a couple of questions that came in on the comments section on the video. So I kind of want to not steamroll through it, but touch as many parts as I can. So real quick, our other sponsors are Music Academy of Acadiana. Their website is musicacademyacadiana.com. You can check them out. If you want to learn music or if you want to send your kids to learn music, that is a great place to do it. Local company. I could read off the entire script, but any instrument that you can think of, they'll teach it. It's founded by UL Lafayette Music School graduate Tim Benson. Great local guys. They're in a emo band, a cover emo band. So if you're a fan of the early 2000s rock music, emo music, they are in a band. And so really, really fun owners, great company. Their goal is to make music lessons fun, educational, to help foster the next generation of musicians and creative thinkers. And again, their website is musicacademyacadiana.com. And then we have Electronic Protection Systems, or EPS, as you may know them. They're another local company, been around for about 20 years. They do smart home security systems, and they also just started doing whole home water conditioning systems. So I met them at the same time that they sold me product, and I've heard of the company, but I started using their products a little over a year ago, and then I said, I like your products, they're really great, and it's a lot more affordable than the other security systems that I've had, and did not trust anymore. And I said, I want to use a local company, so you guys are great. And I think I want to have you guys sponsor the podcast. And so we worked something out, and they did that. Ultimately, they have 0 down payment options. They have no out-of-pocket expenses, no long-term contracts, 24-hour and 24/7, monitoring services at $20 a month. And of course, the water, your water just tastes better and smells better coming out of your faucet if you get their water system. So I'll leave you at that. Great company. If you want to use our referral link, it's LINK. That's link.developinglafayette.com/EPS. If you get a security system or a water system through them, we'll make a few bucks off of that link. Or you can just go to their website, eps-online.com, and check them out. Alrighty. So I want to go ahead and get to the viewer and social media comments first before I get to the structured questions that I have. So first, I'm going on Reddit. And so a couple of things, and this is the very first question that everybody seems to want to know is, why did you change from Democrat to Republican? Because you were apparently registered as a Democrat, and then you switched to Republican. Is there an easy answer to that, or is it kind of you had an epiphany? Like, what does that look like for you?
That is one of the most common asked questions.
I figured. That's why I'd go ahead and get it out of the way right now.
So, I mean, a lot of thought went into that over time. David is a lifelong Republican, so it's not like a foreign subject matter to me.
Did you ever butt heads?
Sure. I mean, I would say it like this. We have the same value system.
Okay.
But in my family, in the Blanco family, everybody butts heads.
Okay,
There is
that's
not
fair.
one, consolidated train of thought. I think we were taught to be very critical, independent thinkers. So the kids laugh, the grandkids laugh at the dinner table, or did. My parents both passed now. We used to have very, very lively conversations. So was not raised in a singular thought process. If anybody thinks that, then you don't know the family.
Yeah, right.
It's a very, very independent thinking family. Anyway, so David has always been a Republican. A friend of mine said to me when I was thinking about this, she said, you're more conservative than anybody else in the race. And I looked at her and I was like, you're probably right. If you look at what people, I guess the what people measure, right? I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, fiscal conservative. I don't spend money unless it's going to have a big impact. I don't waste money. Let me say that. But if you look at my work for 9 years, you really didn't see me in the party wings. And I'm going to tell you this. I don't think you're going to see me in the party wings going forward for one party or the other. I really am going into this position not as a partisan, but I'm going to take the job very serious as an elected official to build a community, to clean up a mess, to solve problems, and to build a community that lives up to the potential we all know we have. And so that's kind of my easy answer. Now, I will say this. What is not conservative or even very Republican is giving one of your buddies $100 million in one singular project that is not even complete. It is not managing by litigation, and it is not taking the police detail.
You're talking about something Josh did.
I mean, yeah, if we're going to measure conservative Republicanisms, I don't think he can carry that banter very well himself. I mean, in honesty, I don't think most Republicans will claim those type of things as conservative or Republicans.
Yeah.
Just put that out on the table there.
Okay.
I know it's the touch point, right?
Yeah.
The touch point.
Yeah.
But I'm honestly want to get in there. The Republican Party represents the values of Lafayette. It's a very strong, I guess, disposition of the community.
Do you think it's almost impossible for someone with a D behind their name to get elected in Lafayette?
It's so interesting. I don't do the catchwords well, and I don't do the national politics well. But I think because of the national discourse, yes. The national discourse has taken those definitions to another level.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That don't make sense at the local level.
That's why I don't register as any of them. I'm independent, so I don't. It's like I have views that lean left, I have views that lean right, and I'm more or less a center person.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, growing up in politics, the parties have a purpose, right? But their mission is not to get into government, and it's to create power structures. It's to get people elected. And so I really am more mission focused on getting in and solving problems and building community and really making us a strong community. And so there's my not easy short answer.
No, I know, and I think
answer.
it's great. I think that is great. So that was the first question, the most obvious question, the one that everybody's been asking me, like, you got to ask her that. I'm like,
yeah.
I feel like she's probably been asked this already, but sure, I'll ask her because I think it's worth asking.
Yeah.
So Priscilla Gonzalez, who was recently running for mayor president of Lafayette, who got disqualified. I had her on the podcast a few episodes ago. One of the things she mentions is to ask her if she's willing to drop the mayor president's salary from $175 to something more reasonable. And before I get your answer on that, I had Jan Swift on last week. Jan Swift mentioned that she would keep the current salary or the salary that was originally positioned before the raise on the mayor president's side. So I guess Priscilla's asking, would you keep the status quo of the pay, or would you accept the 175 or 170, whatever it is, rate? Yeah.
So when you look at salaries, I think you have to build a competitive salary for whoever gets elected. Otherwise, I think when Josh Guillory was elected, maybe he hadn't really processed the salary or the reality of the salary and ended up with many side jobs to try to fulfill that. That, I think, is the reason the council backed up and did a salary analysis. I have not put a lot of thought into that, certainly not as much as Priscilla or even Jan, I'll be honest with you. I'm probably going to accept the salary. I'm going to tell you that. I do believe it needs to be competitive for me or for whoever comes after me.
No, you know what? If there's more money on the table and if the job is hard, I'd probably take it.
I will commit. I will not have any side jobs.
Okay.
That's
fair.
Did not with APC. In fact, building that agency, like building any business, the first 3 years, I probably worked 60, 70, 80 hours a week, making less than half of what I make today. I'm going to put 110% into this. And I think it needs to be, I think one of the issues with LCG today is we've taken a level of professionalism out. and put politics in. We've taken the engineers out of running public works or the drainage side of it. We've taken, we don't have a CPA running finances. LCG has been known for many, many decades as with a high level of professionalism, with really good city workers, and there's been such a political disposition. I think it has a very serious impact on the work. And so I think elevating LCG professionally is one of the top priorities, and it's not just salary. There's a lot of factors that go into that.
Yeah.
But I want to really pull in top people who are professionals in their field, who know what they're doing, who I can rely on, right? You cannot be an expert on anything. I mean, APC was audited as a government agency, so I've been going through that for 9 years. I understand that. I also understand how critical it is to have somebody who understands finances to lean on. I don't want to be the decision maker. And I don't want to sign the checks. I mean, today, we've got Josh and Sidra signing checks. I want the checks and balances that are brought in with professionals.
Okay. Fair. Let's see. What other questions do we have here on Reddit? Okay, so someone asked, and I'm guessing they said I'm guessing for Jan and you as well, and I'm not sure exactly what this means, but would you guys support a ranked choice voting election in the future? I'm not really sure what that means.
I think Alaska has that, and I don't understand it enough to say yes or no. I'll be honest with you. I haven't followed it seems like it's Alaska that has something like that, but I couldn't tell you yes or no because I don't truly understand it.
Okay.
I'd have to look into it.
And also someone asked, so this person that's asking most of the questions, so the one about the ranked choice, I'm going to try to get this right because it's Reddit and the names were Jobbles McGee. And then another person says, this person says is named, it looks like Hannah Baller. And they say, they wanted me to ask you about the library board over the past 5 years, and if it's something that your position would be able to have some sort of voice over. I mean, someone did comment to that person saying that the mayor-president's position has no power over the library board of control, but I guess they're thinking maybe if you were to be elected in your position, that your opinion would carry weight on the issues that affect the library.
Sure, I think the mayor's opinion does carry weight in a lot of issues. It doesn't always carry it over the line, right? Because the parish council determines that. I think if you want to know my opinion on it, we've got to stabilize the library. It should not be on the front page of the paper anymore. I think the school board
There's a whole lot that shouldn't be on the front page.
The school board said they were thrilled with the library because nobody's paying attention to them anymore.
Right. Hey, but the school board at the moment is doing some pretty good stuff at the moment.
And they did get some front pages.
I know 8 years ago there was some issues, but right now it seems like things are going pretty well, according to, because I'm in Leadership Lafayette, and from what I've gathered, the school board, the people that are on the school board at the moment are gelling very well and doing things that are making.
I think they were saying that in just
right,
years
right.
past. They're glad not to be the drama in town, right?
I get that.
I think, I grew up here in Lafayette. I grew up taking my babies to the Lafayette Library, or I guess as a young mom would take them, and it was a safe space, and politics wasn't flying around. I'll answer the hard question in this, or I guess give my opinion, which, again, the mayor, let me just say, does not control the library board, but can voice opinions. I do think they have removed, I would go in with 4 babies, basically, and sit in the sunken-in area and let my kids go into their age-appropriate space.
Yeah.
So they've removed sensitive books and put them there where parents can access them if needed. After that, we need to shut down the politics and go back to having a library that is there for educational purposes, for informational purposes, just that safe space, and not a political space. I think it's part of what defines a community, and the turmoil at this point, I don't see a purpose to it.
Okay, so if I'm understanding right, you think that the current issues that are affecting the library, as far as like what books should be and should not be in the library, is that kind of?
I think so. That's kind of what drove this whole
Yeah.
thing, right? And I think you put age appropriate books in age appropriate places. I'm not saying remove anything, just put it in age appropriate places. So if you have a 4-year-old girl go off, I mean, as a mom of 4, you literally cannot follow every child. Right. Unless you bring them one at a time, which I was never in a position to leave 3 at home, and my mom was busy. I mean, she didn't babysit for me.
It's not realistic to, most parents have to bring their kids everywhere. So.
Right, exactly. And so I think age appropriateness is one thing, and then I think we need some level-headedness on the library board. That's what I think. I'll say that.
I agree. So it's funny that all this stuff about books, and I understand some of these books are pretty wild. Not necessarily in terms of what's going on at the library, but I know in Florida they're having a big issue with some things, and some of the books are pretty detailed in areas where a child should not have access to that. And I do believe that if the books are allowed in schools or broadly across anywhere in the government, that the parents ultimately need to have the say on what the kids may or may not see. Instead of having it broad stroked removed, the parents should be able to sign waivers or whatever have you to be able to allow or not allow.
If the parents want access to the books, they should be given access. I mean, parents need the freedom to determine how they raise their children. I agree with that. Okay. But there should be, again, particularly for young children, there are complexities that very young children, well, when mine were young, I didn't want them necessarily being exposed to without me, and so I think parents should have access if they want it, and the books should be put in age appropriate locations.
Yeah. And I get these are very sensitive topics.
I stepped into that one I shouldn't have, right?
Okay, so now some questions that I have for you that are pretty on point with your issues and the things that you're targeting specifically. One of them was interesting, and I'm going to skip a little bit. See if I can find. It was something about policing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, gosh, I'm trying to find exactly where the question was. But basically, it had something to do with the police department and how would you structure the police department? Because I know right here it says that you wouldn't have the chief of police in a political position where he would... because if that's what I understood, you would ideally want a chief of police that's not leaning politically or running his position politically.
I'm not sure what you're looking at there, but I think what we have today is that politics plays a role in the crime we're addressing, how we're addressing it. I know there's a morale issue. A lot of the individual officers or not in a good spot with their jobs.
Yeah, and specifically like police brutality and all that good stuff. Yeah. That's obviously the past 3 years has been a rising issue.
Right, and so I think I mean what I want. I truly believe the relationship between the mayor and the police chief is critical, and it has to be an honest relationship where you have professional law enforcement bringing in knowledge and understanding of law enforcement to a mayor who is running a city and balancing that, where they can then set priorities together, right? Where you have two different professionals from different perspectives setting priorities together. It seems like most of our priorities are coming out of the administration for the police department, which is very limiting for the police department to actually deal with what they need to deal with. We have an uptick in teenage crime. We have an uptick in shootings. We have some issues that are festering, and sometimes it feels like the biggest issue on the table is homelessness, which it is an issue, but it's certainly not the sole issue. And so as long as we let these issues fester and not really actually deal with crime, or give the police department the resources. I want the best officers trained at the highest levels with the best equipment we can give them. We are a city with enough resources to really build a strong police department. And then I want them to have real relationships in the community. And it's more than coffee with a cop. It really is a trust and an exchange that needs to happen. And then we need to look at, the kids that are at-risk kids and what are we doing there as a community. And so it's a multi-pronged situation. I certainly don't want to be the expert. I need and I'm not saying that the current police chief is not an expert, but I need somebody I can lean on. I don't think there's necessarily a two-way exchange there. I'll say that.
Yeah. All right. So there was somebody that made a comment, making sure it's something I can address. Okay. I'll sit on that and see if it's something I should address soon, but I want to get to the other questions. Okay, so this one's a big one for a lot of people, is flooding and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. So how do you plan to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used efficiently and effectively in developing flood prevention solutions, given the complex and costly nature of such projects?
So, drainage. I think,
a big one, yeah.
I think we do not have a drainage plan.
We're just digging a bunch of holes, right?
We're digging a bunch of holes, 22 feet above sea level. Detention is supposed to use gravity. Is supposed to be set apart from the main. What detention and retention is you look at the whole system and you say, look, right now in Lafayette we have these cement coulees. We're rushing water as fast as we can to the river. The river gets overwhelmed extremely quickly. I live on the river. It seems quicker and quicker all the time. So how do we hold water back out of the system for a day or two until the system can catch up, and then you release it, right? But that's supposed to be kind of natural mitigation with some gravity involved. So today, maybe one of the reasons I'm in this race. So after 2016, I got involved. The Department of Commerce actually brought me into Baton Rouge for the immediate, within a week of the floods, conversations with all of the federal agencies and the state agencies. And in Baton Rouge, they were hit much harder than we were. They didn't have basic services for months. They didn't have electricity, trash pickup. Those were their issues. We were hit really hard, but we came back quick enough, and I could see, we could participate in what it looks like for long-term mitigation, for really looking at the watershed instead of individual drainage projects. But very quickly, we learned we didn't have the data. We weren't collecting data. So nobody really understands the system. So we could do a $100 million project. They don't understand the impacts on the entire system, much less the entire parish, because the data is not there. So I was part of the effort to, with the state, it actually came out of the Acadiana Planning Commission, the idea to build a model. Water science is not new. We didn't have to discover anything. We just had to make an investment, and the state got $1.2 billion. So they took some of that, and they spent, I think, somewhere between 11 and 15 million building a model, which should be ready in the next year or less. I always double the time from the state and feds. It should be ready fairly soon. For the Teche, Vermilion, and Marmontaw rivers and their basins. So we are not making knowledge-based decisions today. One of the things I'll do different, let me kind of back up a little bit, is bring in expertise and have them design and develop a systematic plan, and they cannot be financially tied to the size or the scope of the project, where they're totally objective to, I think with this Homewood, there were other options that were smaller and a fraction of the cost that would have had greater impact. We really have to be making knowledge-based decisions. We have to get the data, and that is coming. Working with Congressman Higgins, there's an authorized study area called Alexander to the Gulf, or east of the Atchafalaya, with the Corps of Engineers. We are working to expand those boundaries to the entire watershed district. So then the Corps of Engineers is actually authorized to work with us. They will take the state model, put it in. They will suddenly have an expertise in our region that they didn't have before. Typically, they work in the Calcasieu or the Mississippi, where commerce is. And I remember them saying that. We were in a public meeting at the library probably 5 years ago, and Mark Wingate was there, and he said, look, if you're not the Calcasieu, you're the Mississippi. That's, our resources are there. So becoming relevant was part of our objective so that we could have real analysis and real science. And we have tremendous engineering resources in this region. We have some of the best engineering in this region. I'm going to say that. So building that expertise around watershed, bringing our young engineers in, all of that is very important. But we can put a real plan together with real data and not make political decisions,
Well, that's great. So my wife had mentioned something, and this has nothing to do with flooding because I have limited time, so to have a conversation about one topic is hard. My wife mentioned that she heard an ad stating that you and Jan have liberal policies. I tried to find the ad for myself so that I can hear it.
I haven't.
But look, I'll check it out after the fact.
I'm not gonna.
But I'm like, okay. So I'll be honest. What I did is I went to your website. I scrubbed everything off of your website, ran it through AI, and told AI, tell me if there is any hint of political leanings in any of this information. And what it gave me was that everything that it established was as neutral as it could be. There was no obvious leanings to left or right, which was pretty interesting because AI is typically supposed to be a pretty neutral structure. And I thought that was interesting. So now what I'm wondering from your opinion is, what do you believe the ad is attacking? Why would an ad say that you and Jan have liberal policies, but yet my wife says she didn't hear any policies cited?
I think that there's one campaign that's hoping to ride the national wave of political catchwords.
Yeah.
Right? That's all it is. It's political catchwords. I mean, and so I don't know. The people who are the catchwords are important too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not, it's certainly not the majority of the parish. I would give it 10%, 15% of the parish maybe are looking for those catchwords. So I'm good with it.
It's just interesting.
I don't know.
It's just interesting.
It's just catchwords. That's all it is.
It's very similar. It's very reminiscent, honestly, with what happened with Carly Umlabar whenever she was running. I adored Carly. She is a super sweet person. She had every intention of doing everything the right way. And I had my relations with her as far as professional goes, because there's no other relations beyond that, is she worked at the permitting office. She was in that space. And she was all about making sure the public had as much information publicly available as possible through her office and through that department. And some things happened, partly because of me, and that changed it. But whenever she was running, the attacks coming at her was very interesting because she is a independent, just like me, doesn't have a D or an R behind her name, and she was attacked. The attackers were saying that she is a liberal, an extreme liberal, and I'm like, have they not talked to her?
So, Ben, it's funny because in this country, and I'm going to go to the whole country, not just the parish, I think the only way to beat an incumbent is to have this level of corruption. Otherwise, the power of the incumbency is extremely strong.
It's strong, yes.
It is strong throughout the whole country. It's not just here. I mean, our current mayor-president uses it at high levels, but it's across the country, right? I think he can say what he wants to say. There was a poll done by Jan's Camp, and the number one issue on people's minds, 38%, their number one issue was not crime or drainage, it was corruption in local government. People are tired of it. We will have new leadership. We will have new leadership. The polls, I know people, when you hear one poll, it's easy to discount one poll, but the polls consistent from January, which we're in September, 9 months, for the last 9 months have been very consistent. People here are ready for new leadership. And I mean, I had to understand that before I got in. I mean, going up against an incumbent is not an easy task. It's one of the most difficult things in politics
Yeah.
to do, particularly one who is so entrenched and well financed. So I had to understand the landscape. I had to understand what people thought about it and how strong they felt. Nobody knows all the details. I can't tell you all the details coming out of LCG right now. But it's not the details. It's the lack of trust, I think, was lost somewhere in the fall of last year. And so this parish, and look, we are working the entire parish. It's actually, let me just say this. It's fascinating to me because all four corners of the political earth have reached out. Some of them under the table for different reasons. They work with the city or whatever, which is fine. They all want new leadership. And I really see it as a gift. I don't know if I should say this on the podcast, but a gift Josh Guillory gave us, because we can land in January with a community, with different sides of a community, with differing opinions, where sometimes we even fight, and not be polarized. It's almost, we're at a point where we have something bigger than this, that we're all moving in the same direction. So, I mean, that's what I did with the region, and that's what, it's harder said than done. So let me just say that. It sounds big, but I don't think it's impossible. I think we can have differing voices address complex issues together and come up with answers that people feel are fair and objective and open, right? And I think all people want, I don't think people always want their way all the time. They want a voice. They want to be heard. They want their concerns to be factored. And so I think that's the great opportunity we have in January, is maybe not to have one of those polarized communities that we see across this country, but one where different voices will be heard. And I'll be honest, I watched my mother do that. When she went into complex issues, she did not have the predefined answers. She sat down with everybody. And if you came in with one side, she'd say, well, who's opposing it? And I need to talk to them. And she would try to understand the differing perspectives and then come up with a good answer for the community. And so she had great success with that. And it's hard. And it's tedious sometimes, but you get better answers and you get long-term answers. I don't like to do things twice. I don't like to revisit things over and over, like I shouldn't bring up another set, but like short-term rentals. We keep revisiting, like let's back it up, get a good solution, something that makes sense, and put that in place instead of just, we just hash and rehash and rehash and rehash. And I don't think you come up with the best answers. And do you ever really solve anything,
Speaking of your mother, so the former governor, she was a woman in leadership as a governor, and obviously in a very traditional state now. I think statewide it's still more, I guess, Democrat based or Democratic based, kind of. I mean, maybe president wise we're red, but as a state are we still more blue?
We're more red.
Okay, well,
we are a red state. I think the only Democrat was John Bell Edwards.
Okay.
Everybody else at a statewide level.
But your mother, was she Democrat?
Democrat, yeah.
Okay. So I guess where I'm going with this, trying to make sense out of it all, is do you feel in Lafayette, as a woman running for mayor president office, do you feel like you have a actual fighting chance against an incumbent male figure with an R behind his name? Because, of course, with your mother being a woman who ran as a governor and got it, do you see yourself not as able because you're a woman, or do you not find that limiting at all? Like, what is your thoughts on that?
So you mix party and
I know I kind of
mix a couple things in there. If you go back to Mom, but she was elected with a tremendous amount of Republican support throughout her career.
I know.
So party wasn't an issue for her.
Which is interesting. But back then we didn't have social media to really drive any issues on that front.
It wasn't so divisive at all. I mean, she was, and the other thing I'll say, so, as far as parents who are Democrats, most people my age have parents who are Democrats.
Oh yeah, my parents were Democrats.
Let me just put that out there for everybody. So your mom and dad, they were. But most parents were. I'm in my mid-50s, So if you're in your mid-50s, you probably, there's a good chance. Do I feel like being a female is a disadvantage? I'm going to say in this race, I do not think it's going to stop me. Is it an issue? Probably. But in this race, because I'm going to go back to the political dynamics of having this level of corruption opens up that door. We don't have another male in the race, so I can't tell you that.
Right.
But I do think we'll have a female mayor president in January. I feel pretty good about that. And I like my chances. I will say that. But I do. And politically, it's not that because we're females, it's because incumbents with this much drama have a hard time getting back in. And that's why.
I really think it's interesting to look at the political landscape, at least as far as the candidacy goes, because there are more women, even with Priscilla, who was running and then got disqualified. Even with her, there were at one point 3 women against 1 man, which is so interesting to see play out. But I'm like you said, I'm curious to see where things are going to go. And according to the numbers I've been seeing, of course, with Jans and some others, Josh is he's fighting to stay as where he's at, but it's interesting to see where it's going. Okay, so I have a little bit more time left. As far as this one was about the police, and the headline was misleading. So while you emphasize supporting law enforcement agencies, how do you intend to balance community safety with concerns about policing practices and potential misuse of power? You kind of touched on it by being more engaged in the community, but is there anything specifically that you would do, a strategy to help the community, and especially the minority community, Hispanics and Blacks, to feel like they are less targeted?
Right.
By police officers? I know this is a huge problem just countrywide, but locally, what other strategy, what would you put forward to help mitigate any potential fears or mistrust in police for minority groups? So
that is a subject matter I'm learning about. I'm going to tell you that. And the way I work, before we got $40 million in broadband expansion, and I did webinars across the country on it, I didn't know anything but turn it on and press the button. So I'd take in for a while before I really understand something. And I did that with broadband. Same thing with watershed. No background in watershed engineering, but today can have spoken on many best practice panels. It's going to be the same thing with law enforcement, right? And I was visiting with a pastor, actually one of our local pastors had him in town, and he's from New York, from the Bronx, and he was a city councilman in New York and now works for the mayor, right? And he's a pastor there in the Bronx. Very interesting person. But when he was on the council before the pandemic, they reduced crime significantly. So I was talking to him, how did you do this? Like, what are the things that worked? And he looked at me, he said, jobs. We found the vulnerable kids, the most at-risk kids, and put them in jobs. And then they had big gang issues. I think we have little gang issues. I don't think we have big gang, but we have kind of
pockets,
little gang wannabes, right? But what they did was hire, maybe they're, I don't. Well, anyway, they hired ex-members, people who had come off the street, to go in and mitigate. Okay. And they calmed the violence down and the shootings down. And so it's interesting. I don't know that that's the answer here, but I'm telling you, I'm going to be having those conversations with experts and communities that have addressed these issues, and that's where my answers are going to come from. It is done well in some parts of the country, and it's not done not well in other parts.
Right.
Let's find the places where it's done well, learn about that, and then figure out what makes sense for Lafayette and for the police department. I do have a good rapport with some in the police department, and I'm learning about some of the issues as well. And so that is something that will evolve and will take a lot of input from a lot of people to really develop what that looks like. And, that'll happen through the transition and into the beginning of my term.
Awesome. You mentioned the broadband information. So what specifically were you involved in as far as broadband expansion goes, and helping bring that to the masses, and I guess also minority groups? Because I mean that's the real issue here is some people are still using dial-up, and that's crazy to think about. Like, I didn't even think dial-up was still a thing. But so what is your take on that? What are you going to do to help improve that situation, and what have you done?
So let me just tell you, dial-up, that goes across phone lines. Some of those phone lines were installed in the 1800s.
That's far. That
blows your mind, right?
To think that 1,800 lines are running internet data, yeah.
Yeah, but they are. So before the pandemic, the board of the Acadiana Planning Commission is made up of the parish presidents, Dr. Savoy, Dr. June at SLCC, Dr. Sorensen at LSUE. We were going through, a process of talking about issues the agency could address. And one of the guys from Evangeline Parish, from Ville Platte, and Ville Platte was ranked third worst in the country for broadband.
Ville Platte? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm from that area, so it was bad.
Yeah. Says to me, if there's anything you can do, Monique, is broadband. And so we went to USDA and got a grant to do a broadband assessment. We spent about a year looking at the technology. And again, I'm telling you, I was raw at that time. I had to have technical people on my staff. We went through it several times so I could understand what it is. And what I realized very quickly, which people in Lafayette probably take for granted, is how powerful fiber was. Mm-hmm. And so while we were trying to figure out who had what and what could we do there, could it be wireless, I was like, stop. Why are we doing any of this? Why are we not working to put fiber into every community? Because if we're going to do anything in government, it takes a couple of years. By the time we get it in, it's going to be obsolete, And so the board voted, and this is pre-pandemic, to make fiber to the home across the region in 10 years, 10 gig by 10 years. We voted probably in 2019. And I remember saying, I don't know how we're going to do this financially, but we're going to just go out there. So we went for the first grant with EDA, which is Department of Commerce, and we got a grant to bring, and they are focused on business. So we focused the grant on business parks down Highway 90, Scott, and we hit that project is being installed, or has been installed just recently. The New Iberia Airport into downtown New Iberia. It was about a $4 or $5 million grant. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh, well, now I know how we're going to do this, right? And so the Evangeline Parish expansion came out of our office, and APC has a tremendous team of people that have different skill sets. Our GIS, our data analysis, we're actually putting the maps together for the FCC now. I say we. I resigned in July, so I should say them.
Talking about the APC?
To go full time. But we went for a competitive grant. And to get a competitive grant, we did private and public. So it was LUS, and it was a private provider. It was, Ville Platte as a poster child. It was a poster child, right? And it actually touches 11 communities, from Basile to Eunice, Church Point, Chautauqua, Kankton, Mamou, Ville Platte, Pine Prairie, Sunset, Grand Coteau, goes all the way to the edge of Leonville. It's a life changer.
Yeah.
I sat down with my staff after, and I was like, I know you did the mapping, but you just changed lives with your mapping. That's the kind of work we built at APC. We didn't want to just have meetings. You can sit on boards, and you can be on committees, and you can meet in government 1,000 times and get nothing done. That was never our objective. It was always, how do we change lives? How do we build communities where people can live better? And so understanding the impact of that. So we went and won that grant. And that was before the state got any money. That was the first tranche of money after the pandemic. And we got $30 million, and I think they only had 277. So we got 10%. It was a nationwide application process, and they had a lot of applications. But we also became the pilot project for our NTIA.
Was this when Kamala Harris flew in, or was supposed to fly in? Did she fly in officially? I can't remember.
She rescheduled like 3 times, but yes.
Yeah. Okay, because was it Sunset that she went to? But we
had it planned in Ville Platte. Oh, it would have been. I mean, Sunset was good. But Ville Platte, again, was the poster child. We had the whole thing planned, and then they called and said, she's coming, and she's coming to Sunset. And so we were like, okay. And when she got off the plane, I called Sean Wilson and said, Sean, I need a description of the Evangeline Thruway in her hands, and I need the Secret Service to drive her down the middle lane so she understands that project, because that needs to be next on the list. They didn't. The Evangeline Thruway has too many side streets, so they drove her the back way to the interstate. But anyway, that was part of our broadband expansion, and it was the
nice.
Yeah. And our assessment actually has been used at the White House and at the state level. That initial report we put together was a tremendous document, and it helped us understand it, but it also helped a lot of other people. Broadband is complex, and it's easy to overspeak it and think, oh, you're good with DSL. I mean, when you're not.
Look, I had DSL back. Oh, God, I was probably 14, 15 years old. We had DSL for the first time in Turkey Creek, which is just north of Ville Platte. And the bad thing about DSL, you got to be so many feet from the office, the central office that broadcasts the signal. So depending on how far you're away from that little office, your connection would be deteriorated. Yeah. And I wanted like cables so bad, and fiber. I didn't even know what fiber was at all until in the past 10 years, which is interesting because I love technology. But we recently got fiber to the home where I live in the Carencro area, and it's wild.
It's a game changer.
Yes.
It was interesting when SchoolMet came. It was 2020. It was that COVID year. I called the CEO and said, did you come? It's a technology company coming out of Silicon Valley, out of San Francisco, and they moved their headquarters here. Did you come because of fiber? And he said, no. He said, but Lafayette would not have been on the list without it. Yeah. I don't think we realize the advantage it gives us. I don't think we take, we leverage that advantage to the max. And I laughed. I said, well, you didn't come for the festivals. And you said, no. We wanted a really fun area, but we had to have the technology. Yeah. And so, somebody asked last night, why the expansion, what does that do for the city? The other thing it does for the city, so to understand the technical capacity of LUS Fiber, there's enough there to service from here to Canada. The investment that was made years ago was huge in infrastructure. And not that we want to service from here to Canada, but we do have that capacity. So with the capital investments that were available, the tens of millions of dollars going into these capital expansions, it creates a revenue stream for the city for eternity. If it's managed well, we have to have good management at LUS Fiber. But so when we don't have years of lots of excess federal dollars, and we go back to our normal budget where we don't have money to just do basic projects, it will be a revenue stream long into the future, And so that was the other thing. I knew it would also help the city of Lafayette. It wasn't just to expand it out into those areas, though I will say impacting lives like that, it allows us, that was an emotional pull for me. It allows us to address elements of poverty. Yep. Doesn't cure it.
Oh, yeah, definitely
elements
not.
Of poverty, healthcare, education, job training in ways we haven't been able to do in some of the poorest areas of the state. And so there was that benefit, and then the benefit of looking at this from a revenue stream for the city. Once the infrastructure is put in place, and as long as the capital money, for the most part is coming from the feds, and the state's about to get $1.5 billion for broadband.
So Louisiana,
wow. An additional on top of the $30 million we got, and the
so
different
1.5 billion,
very close to it,
dude.
Yeah, we'll have fiber. The rural areas, sadly, I don't think Baton Rouge and New Orleans are going to qualify for it. I hope they do. I hope they change the rules, and I don't think they know what we have that they don't have.
Why would Baton Rouge and New Orleans?
Because they're looking to get it to the most rural areas.
Okay, yeah, and so we're full of that here.
The most with the worst service, right?
Got it.
There's decent service in those. Well, actually, some people say not. So there are great concerns. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of the broadband story. I think it's a good one, and I think Lafayette it's a tremendous asset for Lafayette.
Well, because I know you mentioned it during the question about police force and all that good stuff, and I figured I'd bring it up.
Yep.
Okay, so we're at an hour. We don't have too many more questions, but there is something I want to ask you about. As far as the parish goes, there seems to be still over the past. I've been here since 2010, so 13 going on 14 years. A weird thing about North Side and South Side Lafayette, and there's a discrepancy in either, I don't know if it's funding, just negligence. I know private businesses choose to go where the money is, but as far as government goes, I only feel like only recently have we started seeing some like small little nuggets of government investment on the North Side, at least as far as appearance goes, because the North Side of Lafayette is the face of Lafayette. The quote unquote pretty side of Lafayette is all the way, 10 minutes south of I-10. But when people from
now Carencro's got some pretty areas.
Look, Carencro's great, but you still got to go off the interstate a little bit.
So it has been disinvested. I mean, it has been. I think government can't fix it all, but you have to look for catalytic opportunities. One of the projects we were deeply involved in was the taking down the L'Espace Motel.
Yeah, definitely.
And building the Bottle Art Lofts. That project, another game changer. Another game changer. I remember the very first meetings, there were some retired teachers, and, I was listening, and they were like, we've been waiting for this for 20 years. And I knew then this could be big, and people who have properties around there who haven't been able to lease their properties, have been out of commerce for years, will have shown up now, and they're, as soon as that hotel came down and the construction started, their properties went back into commerce. And so it's a catalytic project, that along with the roadway project, which should be breaking ground sometime in the next, I'm going to double and triple that again, 6 months to a year.
Talking about the hotel that's been dilapidated right on the corner of I-49 and...
No, the Four Corners.
Oh, okay, Four Corners, got it.
L'Espace was there. Now we have the Bottle Art Lofts.
Yeah, and you said roadway. What is that?
So the roadway from Four Corners to the interstate.
Okay, roadway, the actual road. Now, I was thinking of like roadway hotel. I think there's or something like that.
The roadway. So let me say this, because some people don't necessarily distinguish university as North Side. But the poverty levels there are tremendous. 40% of the people there don't own a vehicle. They're on foot. It was one of the worst safety corridors in the state, which is how you get transportation funding, ironically, is those safety numbers. But the pedestrian fatalities, the issues on that roadway, I think it's funded somewhere between 30 and 35 million now to rebuild that. You'll see medians, you'll see landscape, you'll see lighting.
And this is for university?
Yep.
Yeah.
From that Four Corners. So it's the gateway entrance.
When are we supposed to see that? Because I feel like that was, I wrote about that a couple of years ago.
Yeah. DOTD has bid the project. I don't know technically, which means they should be breaking ground fairly soon. I have been out of the agency for a little while. So I don't know the exact update, but it should have happened by now. But in the state, sometimes that's why I'm saying 6 months to a year, because it should be happening any day. I'm not sure what the hang up is. But let's give it another 6 months to a year.
I mean, that should ultimately help, at least university and the appearance. I mean, we have Truman Elementary who's getting built there. That's a beautiful school.
That's a game changer in a corridor like that.
Yeah.
A school, they do need a grocery. The bank shut down. I mean, you have to remember people are on foot, and so you're looking at basic services. So I guess my point is that government needs to look at how we can seed investment to grow, like catalytic change. Get rid of that L'Espace Motel was terrible. I mean, it was
bad,
terrible in lots of ways. But we need to look at the entire North Side and understand the gap in services, and then how do we rebuild it, but authentic to the North Side, right? It doesn't need to look like the South Side. It needs to be its own side of town with its own character, true to itself. And I think government can do that. the connector is another major project that will be a game changer in the north side. That one is not, it's going to take a big push, but it's not impossible.
So, you mentioned the connector. So real quick on the connector, the I-49 connector, this is one of the questions that I had, but I didn't know if I'd have time, and I figured I can squeeze in one more. Regarding the construction of the I-49 connector and the core revitalization that is there, it can face challenges, and some of the challenges are community disruption and cost. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is like when the Thruway first went through, it split Lafayette into two parts, one being a relatively poorer side, the other a more affluent side. And part of that was because of the railroad, and the railroad with the soot apparently went, depending on when, it went one way, and then it just, the way it fell. With the I-49 connector, how do you think that that's going to impact that area already that is in the situation that it's in?
In the early 60s, they built the Thruway. Before that, it was a thriving cultural part of town where a lot of minorities lived. There was restaurants and theaters. There's stories of Louis Armstrong playing in some of those neighborhoods. That the federal highways started building highways across the country, and they would typically follow the railroads, just like this one is done, and they would go on the poor side of the railroad. When they built that, we got all of the negative impacts. We got the blight. It shut down 30% of the commercial activity, 30% of the residential activity left. Because, simultaneously, the railroad moved. So there were people living in that Macomb VZ area that was kind of workforce housing that could walk to work, who could no longer walk to work. So several things happened, and that area immediately, blight and crime and a lot of the issues that we see today, it's been frozen in time. It's been frozen in time from the 60s. So there are concerns of bringing in a highway, right? Except we already have it. It's just on the ground level. It's very dangerous. The fatalities are bad. The pollutants are there. All of the negative impacts from a highway already exist.
Yeah.
And until we address that, that is our gateway. That is our gateway. That's where you come in from the airport and everything else. And there's not a lot of dignity there, not for the people who live there or for this community. Yeah. And so let's take the $1 billion or more investment that it will take. And that's where the state opened the rod up. I mean, I don't know how much time or technically you want to get back 6-8 years ago. And the original design was huge. It was traditional, big, giant interchanges. Lots of concrete, and what they did was slim it down and reduce. They took all of the exits through from Taft till past Simcoe, through town off, except for a simple slip ramp. Or I shouldn't call it that; they don't like it, but it's just a ramp that comes off into downtown. So it's almost a flyby of the city, and it's higher. And the Thruway itself is going to. The plans are for it to become a really nice boulevard, local road. So slow speeds, bike lanes, walking, multi-use path for bicycles and walking. And, there's a lot built into this project that would revitalize that. And so then the next step is economic development, which, we're a little ways away from this being complete, right? But we could, then look at what are the authentic North Side businesses that could be incentivized to move into this boulevard area. And then it becomes a natural extension of, not an extension of downtown, but the next cultural district, right? It's taking advantage of the technical need that Federal Highways has for an evacuation route out of New Orleans, for all of these other reasons, but rebuilding a community with those resources is the opportunity I see. And I do understand the negative impacts, but I honestly think we already have them.
I guess one of the major negative impacts that I've been seeing as far as comments go on various different news channels is when you have an elevated highway, especially if you look at New Orleans or cities like that, you typically create almost like a shelter or a tent encampment shelter. Right. And it's where the homeless population wants to try to build shelters there because you're away from the rain and all that good stuff, and it's relatively you feel more safe than just out in the elements. How do you I guess approach that?
You don't build it 16 feet above the highway. You go higher. The way it's designed, that was a big part of the conversation, right? There was a gap between the two directions for sunlight, for rain, for you, and then the usage underneath has to be intentional and conscious. And that's something that LCG has a say in, what is designed underneath and how it is. I think the way it was built in New Orleans is horrible. I don't think anybody can argue with that. Those are they were building highways without considering communities at all. Mm-hmm. The process this project has been in, a
long process.
A long,
future corridor of I-49 for years.
You know what? People on Lafayette are dramatic and passionate. I think that's what I would say to all the engineers. They would bring all these engineers in, and I was like, look, we are passionate. We love this place. And that sometimes is messy, but it gives us better results, I think.
We don't want our community destroyed. I mean, for lack of better words, there has been times in the past where it has been destroyed and people have made do and figured it out. But
that's what we have. I mean, look at that throughway.
Yeah.
And we don't have the resources to rebuild it, right? I mean, in an ideal world, the elevated piece would go somewhere else, but the traffic would still come through. Mm-hmm. So to get that through traffic, which is typically the big trucks and the
18-wheelers.
Even if we built it through St. Martin Parish, the fastest route is through
Straight
Lafayette.
Through, yeah.
So they would come, stop at all live red lights. They would still come through Lafayette.
And the 18-wheelers are what's really causing the most damage on the highways because, you have a small little bump and then the trucks keep hitting it with all the weight and it cracks it.
And I think we have, I don't know how many lights. I had it in my head at one point in time. It's been a couple of years.
It feels like there's like 30.
Yeah, but think about those trucks. There's front doors right by those lights. So they're starting and stopping. I mean, the emissions of the start and stop through town is huge.
Lot, yeah.
The noise. And so the other design elements in there are to funnel the noise. It's closed girders instead of open girders. In New Orleans, you just have those 70s highways.
Yeah. They
don't build them. We're not going to build this one like that.
So it's going to be relatively noise canceling to some degree, at least as far as the traffic, the highway traffic goes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Part of the part of the record of decision was an agreement that they could not build it with a higher level of noise than what already exists.
Okay. That makes sense.
But we have a lot of noise. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Again, we have the negative impacts we're living with right now.
I guess the last thing about the I-49 connector, and then I will end this because I've taken up too much of your time, is how may it affect downtown with it being a pass-through? Because right now there's several access points to downtown. There's Simcoe, there's East 2nd, I think East 2nd or 3rd, basically Cameron or Congress, one of those. It's and then you have Jefferson, you have Johnston, you have all those, and then with an elevated highway with a ramp going down, I mean, it's essentially going to create this almost like an airline highway situation where people are just flying over Lafayette rather than stopping.
So is your question...
Basically, how does it affect downtown's ability to remain a relevant, strong part of Lafayette's economic position?
So it was the downtown community that really pushed to get rid of the interchanges because they were very large, took up a lot of real estate. I think it's from Taft to Simcoe that the through traffic is not stopping otherwise. So the boulevard will serve as the service road. So if you want to get off in Lafayette, you can get off at Willow and just come on in, or else you can slip down. But Willow is probably the primary exit down into the boulevard area. And that serves as a service road as well, but the speed limits probably will go down. I think Lafayette, the plan is once it's built, Lafayette will take it over and have control over those
Oh, nice.
speed limits.
Yeah, because we don't have control over it right now. It's a state road. Yeah.
No, correct. But eventually we will have control, but it will still service as the service road. So you could get off at Willow and then right. And it's funny because that was what DOTD originally proposed, was just you get off at Willow. But psychologically, people did not associate Willow with downtown.
Right,
so
right.
downtown, proposed, could we have another smaller ramp? But the traffic does flow. The through traffic is not, it's going through. I mean, either way. But
Yeah, I think, it may be negligible. There may not be a huge issue with it. I mean, because the people that are wanting to go through Lafayette are already dead set on going through anyway. They're just being
Right.
forced to stop at, 1,300 red lights.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing having the overpass.
And the access flow doesn't allow for, let me stop at this business or that business
Right,
on the throughway.
right, yeah.
No, but you don't see that. I mean, the throughway is not a safe place to.
It's literally through, just going straight through.
It is true. That's correct.
All right. Well, I'm pretty sure there are several things that we can dive into more, and that'd be a lot longer than I think what you and I want to do. And I think we've gotten a lot. Jan also, we did about an hour and a half with her, and I was hoping to stay about an hour, but certain questions had longer answers, and it just, the way it is.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, I
It was
appreciate
good.
you coming, and I hope that those that are listening and watching got what they needed out of it. And I know there's still a lot that we didn't touch on, environmental stuff, education. There's a lot, economics and business environments, but I'm pretty sure that we'll start to hear more about that. Are there any more planned like debates or moderated panels?
So next week, KLFY and KDN both have, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, televised debates.
Next Friday?
No, maybe one on Tuesday and one on Wednesday.
Okay.
I don't know right off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah,
but
we can look it up.
It's on the website. I think on our Facebook page we have like a little kind of chart of different events. But so there will be 2 televised debates.
Okay.
Or
So it'll
not
have-
debates, forums.
Yeah, forums, 'cause-
Nobody's been brave enough for a debate.
I think having a debate would be wild.
It
Okay.
would be wild.
So it's going to be you, Josh, and Jan.
As far as I know, yes.
All right. Well, cool. Well, that is all we have today. Monique, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me and help me
Sure.
out and get some kind of answers to some of the questions that I had and several other people had. So
Yep.
it looks like we...
Anytime, Ben. I enjoyed it. I think it's great discourse for the community to have, and you are definitely of value, the outlet
appreciate that.
here to bring different subject matter up and discussed and kind of picked apart. So it's
All
good.
right.
Enjoyed
Well,
it.
good luck with the race. And if you want to go ahead and just kind of shout out your website and kind of let people know where to go to find more information about you.
Sure. So the website is Monique for Mayor, MoniqueForMayorPresident.com, and the Facebook page is the same thing, Monique for Mayor President.
Awesome.
Pretty simple. So go there. If you want more information, you can reach out if you have questions. Definitely excited, ready. Early voting is in a week and a half.
Yeah, September 30th, right?
September
Yeah.
30th through October 7th. There's a lot going on Election Day, so go and early vote. And I'll ask for your vote and your support. Vote for Monique.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, good luck, Monique, in the race. And as the cliche thing is, may the best person get the spot.
There you go.
All right. Well, hope you have a great rest of your week and a good weekend. And again, good luck with the race.
Thanks.
All right.
Appreciate it.